All right, it's Security Weekly News, episode 228. I'm Doug White, and that's Russ Beauchemin, who used to be here all the time and is now just visiting and joining us. It's Security Weekly News 228. Welcome to the week of 31 July 2022. We got Roy Batty, Encryption, Microsoft, Lockbit 3.0, Twitter keys, Outlook crashes, 911, and Russ on the Security Weekly News.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week. Your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News.
Right now, everybody is talking about cryptocurrency, and the cyber criminals are hiding in the conversation. Cyber criminals use social engineering loaded with urgency and fear to successfully prey on your company, your employees, and your customers. Spear phishing is just one of the 13 types of email threats. Barracuda has identified 13 types and shows you how you can protect your company, your customers, and your reputation. Find out about the 13 email threat types and Barracuda email protection by going and getting your free ebook at securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda.
Monitoring and maintaining compliance is a never-ending struggle with a high price of failure. Firemon helps customers meet complex and varying compliance requirements. Firemon has fully customizable reporting, analytics, assessments, and dashboards to meet the compliance needs of any organization. With Firemon, compliance reports take a tenth of the time, and real-time continuous compliance eliminates the anxiety and headaches of audit preparation. Improve security outcomes by improving security operations with Firemon. Visit securityweekly.com/Firemon to learn more.
All right, we're back, and it's the Security Weekly News. Microsoft announced that they have a new tool called the Microsoft. You're going to love this name, the Microsoft Defender External Attack Surface Management Tool. Yeah, like they should add a couple more words anyway, just to make it an even dozen or whatever. Or the MDE, the MDASM, which sounds interesting, but yeah, I don't know. But anyway, I'm sure somebody will come up with something to call this so that you can remember, like TED or something. But anyway, it's an attack surface management tool that theoretically will make it easier to discover vulnerabilities and block attack vectors, which is what attack surface management tools do. I mean, essentially what they said it did was it scans all the internet connections and creates a catalog of the environment, so ASM, which would include all the other IoT devices, other devices on the network, and so on and so on and so on. So basically, it's a scanning tool. I mean, it collects data and builds out your asset list, which is what ASM does. So I guess eventually they'll probably embed that into Active Directory or something like that. But there's a lot of other tools competing with this out there. But I looked at the site. They have a free demo. It didn't have anything about the pricing or anything, but it obviously is not included for free since they had a free demo. And at the same time, they also announced that a second product called Microsoft Defender Threat Intelligence would be available to supply SecOps teams with threat intelligence to speed up attack investigations and remediation efforts. That tool sounded pretty interesting to me. The tool says it will provide real-time data from the Microsoft Daily Security Signals repository, which reputedly contains something like 43 trillion daily signals. So I guess that could be pretty useful. And again, there's a lot of other products that do this same kind of stuff, but that one's out there. No info on what any of these things cost. It just says contact sales. There's a button. So if you want to contact them, you can. And there was a free trial link. Now, I couldn't resist because immediately on the heels of seeing that story, I saw one that says Lockbit 3.0 ransomware is basically abusing, wait for it, Windows Defender. And I was like, okay, so wait, what? Windows Defender, now Windows Defender being abused. Okay, so this is yeah. The Windows Defender command line tool was being used to load Cobalt Strike beacons. Now, I was already starting to sound skeptical when they said the command line tool is being used. So Sentinel Labs reported that the abuse of the MPC mdrun.exe tool, which is part of that whole package, was being used for side-loading DLL attack that could decrypt and install Cobalt Strike beacons. Okay, so I was still in this sort of question about, was this a flaw in this product at Defender? But anyway, now to be fair and unbiased, it was not a flaw in Defender. I know, it's hyperbolic. I know, so that's the headline stuff. We had to suck you in, right? So now that you're sitting there with tears in your eyes, we can give you the whole story. They're not really starving. But it wasn't a flaw, but it was rather that they observed that the initial compromise in both cases was Log4j on a VMware Horizon server. Okay, so they use Log4j to get in and get escalate and get permissions, and then they just used PowerShell from the Log4j compromise to download 3 files: a DLL, the Windows command line, and a log file. Okay, so what mpcmd run exe does is it runs a DLL called MP client, and that MP client DLL is part of the program normally, so standard stuff. But the attackers basically did a really old school thing, and they created a weaponized version of mpclient.dll. So they name it the same thing, and they put it into the path. So this old path interjection stuff is really, really old school stuff. I mean, like that. I remember doing stuff like this a long, long time ago with these paths. But the log file has in it an encrypted Cobalt Strike payload. So the log file is just laying there, and then basically the DLL de-encrypts it and assembles it, and then puts the Cobalt Strike beacons on there. So despite the headline, they didn't, to me, really abuse Defender other than just misuse it. But I guess we could argue semantics all day long. And, it just did what it's supposed to do, which was load this file. So I guess Microsoft will have to work on, maybe verifying that file or something like that. Log4j was the real malware there. And, of course, the real villain in all this was that you didn't patch your VMware, so you got exploited by Log4j. I mean, I guess they did abuse Defender a little bit. And Defender is at fault for loading a file it should not have loaded, even though it really loaded a file that looked like the file it was supposed to load. Am I becoming like a Microsoft apologist? I mean, next thing you know, I'll be the pink lady reading the news for Kim Jong-un. He's my guy. He's, Kim, yay, Kim, call me, bro. But anyway, there's a picture to help you sleep at night, if just in case you were, oh dear. Yeah. Okay, yeah. If you're just listening, you can't see the photo add-in. So please, don't ever look at that again. CloudSec discovered a set of 3,207 mobile apps that are exposing Twitter API keys to the public, which would possibly lead to the hijack of account associated with that app. Basically, if you don't know, and I'm sure you probably do, but API keys, of course, are used to authenticate other apps back into your Twitter account. So, you get those API keys for any kind of different thing, and, many, many other things besides Twitter. And it basically lets you use other products, in this case, to generate tweets, to receive updates, and so on. We used to use a product that would let you, you could make a tweet, and it would also post it on Facebook, and it would also post it on Instagram and all these other kind of places. You can send messages and all this sort of stuff with these, especially with marketing tools and what have you. But they found that the leak was caused by app developers who just didn't understand security or how API keys work, and they embedded the keys in the Twitter API. So, and that's fine, but then they don't get rid of them when you close the app. So they just stay there. And so if somebody else can get the API keys, well, they can connect to that same account. And so basically what happened was, with this, they found that you could read somebody's messages, you could retweet, you could like things, you could tweet, you could delete tweets, basically all the stuff you do with Twitter. You can add and remove followers, access your account settings, change the display pictures, pretty much total hose of your account. They did not, however, in this article, disclose the list of apps, which is kind of frustrating to me because they're waiting for the notification period of 1 month to expire. So we may all have some of these apps around. But at the moment, we don't know. But they have notified all the app developers that this is going on. The only app they did list was Ford Motor Company, which had responded already and pushed a fix out on this thing called Ford Events app. I don't know what that is, but they said it was vulnerable to this. It's a very interesting article, and there's a lot more details about how this works and so forth if you're interested. And you may want to follow that story if you have a lot of apps that manipulate your Twitter account to make sure that they get patched. Outlook's been crashing. I mean, I don't know if I didn't mean to say that, but it's apparently when you get an email that has a complicated table on board. The example they used, and apparently was what originally triggered all this, was Uber receipt. So if you get an Uber receipt, apparently it's a complicated table. So they did have an example of what this looks like, and apparently it can happen when you open an email or reply to an email or forward an email that has one of these tables in it. And I don't think it had anything to do with Uber per se. It was just a complex table that was in it, because the crash is caused by the rendering of the table, which is done by Word. So Word renders the table for Outlook, and I guess the table complexity simply blew it out of the water. Currently, there is only a workaround, and the workaround is one of those that you don't like very much, which says revert to a previous version. The current version is 2206 build something. I put it in there. It's build 15330 with a whole .20196, so you can see it in the show note article link. But if you're having this problem, but they said that a patch had been developed and that it was in alpha or it had been pushed into the beta stream channel and would likely be out in the 9 August Patch Tuesday event, which would be next week. So if you're having Outlook complaints from your help desk, this may well be what it is, and you may well want to do something about it until next Tuesday so you don't get 900,000 calls. Samsung released a new feature for Galaxy phones called Repair Mode. Now, there are some famous cases, there's some made-up cases, and there's even a case I worked on where somebody takes their phone in for repairs, and the tech decides to do more than just replace a cracked screen. Or the case I worked on, the tech decided to examine all the photographs on the phone and decided to keep some for themselves, and then decided to post those on various sites. But there's been all kinds of cases like this where techs have examined your equipment when you brought it in, including laptops. There's the famous Hunter Biden story, which nobody knows if it's true or not. Different people have different opinions. There's all kinds of celebrity incidents of this kind of stuff and so forth. Well, anyway, so, this is a good thing. Sometimes that somebody might see stuff like that, like when they find out that the Perth Amboy nose eater serial killer took pics of the victims first. But it's usually a massive privacy invasion, and it's probably resulted in more than a few, leaks and so forth. So Sam Mobile saw the new feature being announced in a Korean press site. They did not announce this in the United States, but they said it was launched in the S21. So that's the previous version of the Galaxy. So you apparently, even if you're not in Korea, can turn this on in the settings menu, and then if that is enabled, no one can access anything other than the default apps on the phone. Now, when you want to exit this mode, you have to actually log in again. So you have to go in and put in a pattern, a PIN number, or a fingerprint, and then go in and turn that off. So they did not provide any information in the article on how it works, but I guess it would be like a shell or something. So they just pop up a second shell that's like the default. I don't know. They didn't say how it worked. But I think it's a pretty good feature because I have thought about that a lot. And you probably don't want to wipe your phone just to take it in to be repaired. And of course, if the repair people have access tools, they may be able to get into it. 911 is a proxy service. I won't call it a sketchy proxy service, but it was called that in the article. I'll probably call it that eventually. But they started in 2015, and they apparently sold access to hundreds of thousands, or they have access to hundreds of thousands of Windows computers every day. And they did announce this week that they are closing up shop for good. They had apparently a data breach that destroyed quote, key components of their business operation. Now, this came out of Krebs, and Krebs published an in-depth look previously about 911 and alleged that a lot of shady stuff was going on with this company and that they were putting their software into a lot of pay-per-install affiliate programs that were bundling this software like bloatware and, of course, other titles into free utilities and wares and all kinds of stuff in order that this product would be installed on your machine, maybe without even your knowledge. Now, he didn't apparently know why they were doing this or what they were getting out of it. So 911 was supposed to be a residential proxy. So if you've ever seen it or used it, it was used by a lot of people who were downloading pirated software, mind you. But basically what it does is it gets you an IP that's a virtual IP, and then you can use to relay everything from your system through that. So it's a kind of, Tor. It's not a Tor thing, understand, but it's kind of like that. And you're just bouncing all your stuff off of this IP so that you can sort of be anonymous. I wouldn't call it anonymity, but it also could be used to disguise that you were supporting a whole network on a single user type connection, which people were doing. That used to be a big deal. It's not so much anymore. But if your ISP says you can only have so many users and you want to hide how many users there actually are, this was a mechanism for doing that. Now, like a lot of free proxies, this one actually runs using other people's computers. So your computer may be being used as a relay for other people, which could be really bad. So I always thought these things were super, super sketchy. See, I told you I'd say it. But I always didn't trust this stuff. But, it gives you the illusion of some kind of anonymity. And, of course, there also used to be firewalls. There used to be restrictions on IPs, et cetera, et cetera. So after the Krebs story came out, they pretty quickly shut down on 28th of July. They claim that they were hacked in early July. And Krebs' story was all kind of like, maybe this is still kind of shady. They said somebody manipulated the balances on a lot of accounts, like money accounts, via an API that handles the reloading of those accounts. He seemed rather negative about this whole thing. So anyway, the whole thing sounded really, really sketchy, and Krebs obviously felt that way. So it's worth reading an article if you've ever used this service or you know people are, but there's a lot of people who have used it, so keep that in mind. And it is shut down right now. If you've been following this contest, like me, NIST announced 4 finalists. And notice how anything that starts with NIST is an immediate nerd fest. I mean, instantly. But anyway, NIST announced that 4 finalists in their post-quantum computing encryption algorithm contest were now out this year. So this is a race against the quantum clock, since anybody can start building, machines that have more than a few qubits any day now. And then, things like RSA, Diffie-Hellman, elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman, and so forth are probably going to get cracked faster than a well-digger's instep. And yet my friend Lou always mixed up metaphors and things like that, and he never could get idioms straight, so I just make up new ones and credit them to him. I think I made that one up, but hey Lou, if you're out there somewhere in the void. But anywho, the contest produced 4 new algorithms as potential replacements, and one of them is called SIKE, spelled S-I-K-E, which stands for Super Singular Isogeny Key Encapsulation. I think Microsoft must have named that one. But unfortunately, SIKE proved to be a psych out because a paper published over this last weekend by Computer Security and Industrial Crypto Group at KU Leuven proved an attack on the algorithm using a single non-quantum PC, like a single CPU PC, and they were able to crack the thing in about an hour. So, that was the second of the 4 candidates that had been forwarded that got invalidated this year using good old math. So back in February, a researcher named Ward Bellins broke Rainbow, which was another one of the finalists. This contest has been going on for about 5 years, and it started with 69 candidates, and they were down to 4 by 2022. So, that's the way that kind of stuff kind of goes. Well, our old friend Russ is going to join us today, and we haven't gotten to see Russ as often on shows as we used to when he was on Secure Digital Life all those years ago. I did get to have drinks with him in Switzerland last month, which was pretty cool. So welcome aboard, Russ.
So, in line with, and thank you, in keeping in line with this idea of privacy, I wanted to bring up a topic that I saw on Gizmodo yesterday. So, the article in 2012, a New York Times cover story entitled "How Companies Learn Your Secrets," introduced the world to Andrew Pohl, a statistician. I tried. A statistician who worked at Target and was asked to come up with a way to single out potentially pregnant shoppers so Target could directly market pregnancy products to those women, even if they didn't want Target to know they were pregnant. And who would, right? As a result, Pohl created the pregnancy prediction score that Target would then assign to its customers to determine the likelihood that they were pregnant and more directly market those related products to those individuals. So let's fast forward to now 10 years, and we've already seen that type of technology used in our mobile devices, right, with MAID, right, which is the mobile advertiser identifier, and they were baked into most Android and iOS mobile devices. These IDs are super specific and, for the most part, cannot be disabled, although they can be reset, which we'll get into later. Anyone who has used their device to search for things like Nikes or PlayStation 5 or at-home COVID tests knows that after searching for those items, they'll see advertisements related to those products, or those products specifically appear in advertising banners or on Facebook news feeds, etc. Some studies go further to suggest that smartphone/smart home devices are listening all the time and using your captured speech to advertise, though this hasn't been substantiated out of a few anecdotal stories you can find on the internet, but scary nonetheless. It's even happened to me. So, since we have been dealing with these privacy concerns for more than a decade now, why is this so important today? In other words, why did this story come back into the purview of the interwebs this week? Well, just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, turns out it has. In the article posted on Gizmodo this week, the authors Wodinsky and Barr found that 32 companies were selling those mobile identifiers associated with 2.9 billion people who were targeted as actively pregnant, and 478 million profiles labeled as interested in becoming pregnant or intending to become pregnant. Okay? So in your cell phones, I use iOS. I was a child of Android, and then I went to the dark side. So in iOS, if you open up your settings and you go to privacy, and then you can go on tracking, you can see your advertiser identifier. Okay. In the show notes too, I also put a link to the Google sheet that houses all of the companies, the 32 that they found, that are selling the data. Okay. So why is this important? Why is this relevant now? It's a huge deal now because of the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. So if there's interest in categories or products, or worse, individual products themselves that can be tied to a specific device, what is going to happen in ultra-conservative states that take reproductive health care very seriously? Searching for terms like abortion or Plan B could be used to prosecute someone, all right? The authors found that there have not been any legal cases so far that have been used to date to prosecute, but the potential is there to do so. They go on to say that commercially available consumer data has been mostly used to find ownership of property, though it is possible to use this data coupled with the maids themselves by law enforcement to target specific people or groups. Furthermore, the authors report that the publicly available nature of this consumer data could be a way to get around needing a warrant or having to subpoena information. So, how do you stay secure and private in these modern data-hungry corpo ruling times for my cyberpunk friends out there? Be aware of your maid. Reset it frequently, okay? Opt out of ads and opt out of personalization if possible. Limit your ad tracking on iOS and on Android, as I talked about, settings, privacy, and then advertising. Stop Google location tracking. That's really, really important because of geotagging and things like that. You can do that in the settings Google account, data and personalization, and turn off web and app activity. Remember that Google and other advertising companies are scanning almost everything on your device to try and direct market to you. This includes emails, text messages, previous searches, cookies, voice memos. Heck, your device may even be listening to your speech. It wouldn't surprise me at this point. Nothing really does. Using the above suggestions, you can at least try to regain some semblance of privacy. What do you think, Doug?
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely a believer that we were testing like some of the listening devices, and just by literally saying words in our house that were things we would never ever be interested in,
like Horace something, you know.
Yeah, and suddenly we were getting ads on various products, and I definitely think that all our privacy friends. I mean, there's a lot of people that watch the shows, that listen to the shows, that are very, very heavy privacy oriented type people who don't want any violation of their privacy. I personally don't really care if you market to me. I would rather get ads that are more directed at me, but I think the overarching fear of this is this, very William Gibson kind of now, all this data was supposedly anonymized. I read this story too.
Yep.
And a lot of it was anonymized, but the thing is they collect so much data now that the theory anyway is that you can link all this data together, sometimes through multiple data sources, and you can figure out who the person is. And
that we've seen two cases that were in court related to people who were using at-home genetic testing for 23andMe and on Ancestry.com. And by themselves, they're relatively secure. It means that they don't sell your data, but when they pair it up with this third-party database that tried to establish connections between lost family members and things like that, the police were able to use that third-party database to find two killers that were cold cases, one in Colorado back from 1993, and one right here in Warwick, Rhode Island from 1980. And they were able to find out who the killer was, and
well, it's like the metapixel stuff is like that too, and I mean that's being used to track part of it, and then you put that together with a whole bunch of other parts, and you start to assemble this profile of somebody using database joins essentially to link all this data together. So it's very scary, because especially, and I think the Roe v. Wade, and regardless of where you sit in that argument, I mean, we're not here to preach politics. Nope. But regardless of where you sit in the Roe v. Wade argument, it is a very good example of exactly how privacy can get abused. And this is the stuff our privacy-oriented friends talk about all the time, where the state decides, what right or wrong or whatever you think about it, that something, fill in whatever you want here, guns, Roe v. Wade, you pick one, and they say we're going to start identifying people that we want to prosecute, harass, and or they do this with politics. The politicians are trying to find who are my enemies, who are the people who voted against me, and all this kind of stuff. We saw that in the 2020 election, 2016 election. We've been seeing that kind of stuff, and now you're seeing it here with this very same thing with Roe v. Wade, and it's a very scary thing because this is what every time I always give my I don't care about my privacy. I don't care if you watch what I'm doing, and my privacy-oriented friends go, you'll say that now.
Yeah. Now look at us. Right?
Until they come and they round you up because you said something about President X. Back in 2018, and now that's illegal, and they're going to round you up and put you in the re-education camp to learn that you really need to be saying this and singing the national anthem.
1
at the
plus
same
1
time.
equals 3.
Yeah, exactly. So it all turns into 1984 at some point along there. All right, thank you, Russ.
Thanks, Doug.
And finally, remember how Roy Batty died on that rooftop? I mean, it's like classic scene, very well done by Rutger Hauer. Is like this, and supposedly he ad-libbed most of it, and it's just like burned into your brain. And replicants had this really nice clean end date that was built into their code, right? I mean, they were going to die. I mean, and it was just when they didn't, turn themselves in for recycling or whatever happened to Rep. They never sort of got into what happened to them. They just sent the Blade Runner out to execute them. But apparently a lot of products are designed that way. This last story I had, a lot of products are apparently designed like this. And again, this is something we've often suspected. It's called planned obsolescence. It's an old business term from, I think, the advent of light bulbs. Like Edison wanted to build a light bulb, and they said he could have built one that would last almost forever, but he chose not to because then he wouldn't sell any more light bulbs. Once you bought a light bulb, you'd be done. He wanted to sell you a light bulb every 6 days or so. So make them burn out. You got to keep those smokestacks churning out and those fat stacks of cash rolling in. So you make sure it doesn't last as long as that avocado green refrigerator that belonged to your grandmother that your parents had in the garage for 20 years and now it's in your basement for 20 years and it's still running. Yeah, like my friend Lou had one of those. He had a washing machine like that too. Literally the inception date on the washing machine was something like 1973, and the thing was still running. And it wasn't the avocado green shade. It was that. I'm not going to say what it was, but it involves bodily fluids generated by babies in diapers. Yeah, but it, it did have a kind of queasy overtone to the refrigerator.
At least it didn't smell like that.
But this article that I posted analyzed 14 different consumer gadgets to try and determine their end dates. One of the ones they had was AirPods, and they said 2 years. Because the battery in them will simply go bad. They know how many cycles that battery will last, and they said depending on how many times you recharge it, in about 2 years it's going to quit working. iPhones, probably 3 years. And, of course, Apple got in a bunch of trouble before for, downgrading so that the batteries would burn out faster on older phones, and they got in trouble for that and so forth. But they still make batteries with a projected life. They could make them longer. They just choose not to. I'm sure they have a good business argument about it. It would cost a lot more, make the phone weigh 19 pounds, so they can't possibly do it. Bose headphones, 5 years. So all of this is because the batteries do essentially fail after a specific number of 80% recharge cycles. So you don't need a Blade Runner if Roy's just going to die in a minute. He can't recharge anymore. So when he plugs in, he gets a minute's worth of charge, and that's it. But Tyrell Corporation was an Apple, so they didn't think about this, and they built stuff to last, so they had to have Blade Runners and all. It made a good movie anyway. Anyway, it's a very interesting article. Check it out before it's gone like tears in the rain. And that's the news. Thanks, Russ, so much. We'll see you Friday on the Wrap-Up Show.